Thanks for joining us at Proxyclick Connect. We're going to discuss now how to ensure a healthy building. I'm Ryan Koch, Customer Success Lead for the Americas. Joining me today are Joanna Frank, President and CEO of Center for Active Design, and David McGinnis, Head of Business Development at OpenPath. Joanna, if you want to introduce yourself really quickly.
Sure, thank you. And hello, everybody. I run the Center for Active Design, and we are the operator of the Fitwel Healthy Building Certification System. And we run that globally. We're in 40 countries. Fitwel was actually launched 4 years ago, and actually only completed the build out of the tech platform in February of last year. So we've had a very busy 2020-21, as you can all imagine. So great to have this discussion this morning. Thank you.
Wonderful. And David?
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be part of this session. So I'm Dave McGinnis, Head of Business Development at OpenPath. We're a physical access control platform, and we bring sort of modern technology to the space, including a native cloud-based platform, open APIs, and a unique and embeddable mobile experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So today, what we're discussing is a question that's on the mind of every business leader nowadays. How do I repopulate my buildings and restart my business? Thanks to COVID-19, health and safety have never been more top of mind. We're now hyper conscious of the places we go, as well as the people and items with which we interact. When you think about a healthy building, what may immediately come to mind are eco-friendly components such as recycled products and solar panels. While these can certainly contribute to the strength of a business, they're just part of the solution. Facility design with people's well-being in mind has a broader scope that emphasizes cleanliness, safety, air quality, proper climate, and low noise. At the end of the day, the buildings are as healthy as the people that populate it. Is healthy buildings, healthy people a 21st century vision?
I'll jump in here. I would say that understanding health and buildings has been known since medieval times. So we actually used to, not we, any of our generation, but people used to build rooms in order to cure the sick, they didn't call them hospitals, around courtyards. And in the courtyards, there were flowers and there were sounds of music and fountains. And those rooms actually had cross ventilation. Again, not spoken about in those terms, but understanding that, to move the air through was good for the humors or the whatever, miasma or whatever the term was at the time. So we've understood inherently that the design and the operation and actually the maintenance of our spaces, the way things look and feel, has a big impact on our health. And then there's 100 years of public health research in the more modern times, which really shows the direct connection between the design and the maintenance and operation of buildings and our neighborhoods at large, and their measurable impacts on all aspects of health. So we really do understand from a research perspective how to build and operate buildings to be optimized for people, their physical health, but also their mental health as well. And I would say the real challenge now in this kind of hopefully soon to be post-COVID world, but as we kind of enter this new phase, is really understanding how do you support the trust between the building owners and the building managers and the occupants of their buildings, because you need to have that bond of trust, and you need to understand that the way that a building presents, the way it looks, the way you communicate, the language you use, the signs you use, the way that your staff communicate, are all actually going to measurably impact people's trust in your ability to operate that building and create a safe space for people. And I think the thing with COVID, and we put out a viral response module, which is an overlay to Fitwel specifically about how to address COVID. We know from that you need to do all of these physical things to a space, right? So you need to increase the amount of air changes coming into a space. You need to change the filtration. Maybe you need to upgrade your cleaning policies. But none of those things can be seen by the individuals that are in the building, right? Even I, a building professional, couldn't go into a mechanical room and say like, oh, I see that you have the air changes set at the prescribed rate, right? That's just not the way it is. So I have to trust you as I walk into that building that you are doing everything to optimize this space and make it safe for me. And that's trust. And we also know how to build trust, right? There's an evidence base around how to communicate, how to show, what the signs are of trust. So I think trust is key here. And we're going to probably talk about it again and again in this conversation.
Yeah, and just to layer on to what Joanna said, trust is a huge part of it. And it's we didn't hear that pre-pandemic, right? It was all about how do you maximize capacity, right? Occupancy. I'm in a fast-growing technology company, and we worked at workbenches, right? And it seemed like every Monday there was one more person on that workbench, and it didn't really affect you. That was just the way you accepted this is the workplace. But today, after working remotely for the last nearly year and a half now, and our interactions within society, generally speaking, we've embraced this concept of social distancing, right? And we expect that is going to extend as we return to the built world, as we return to work. And so it's about feeling comfortable and confident, right? That it's safe to return, and safe could be applied to many different factors. It's ensuring that you have access to information. And I'm going to be one who is going to consume more information to inform or shape my work schedule, right? So now I want to understand how many people are in the building, or how many people are arriving at the same time that I arrive, right? Can we schedule that so that we can sort of break up those potential queues or congestion? Is there clear signage, right? And are there decals that help me navigate appropriately and in a safe way? Are we screening people, right? Has someone been exposed to the virus, right? And if they have been, I would prefer that they're not at the property, right? Not in my workspace. And how do we manage this not only through our fellow employees and other tenants in the building, but how do we factor in and how do we address the sort of a transient population of visitors or contractors that come on site? So all of these things, result in, I think, a need and a desire and an expectation for better space planning, more available information. And that, I think, are the building blocks then of trust that Joanna had shared.
Excellent answers, and I love it. And I do agree. I think prior to perhaps COVID, and especially as we go into the 21st century, there may have been more of an onus on the individual employees to keep a clean and safe work environment. Whereas as we're coming back from COVID, I think there's a better understanding that these aren't all in the employee's control day to day. And there's a wider conversation, not just, as we said, like recycling, but what does the building do to facilitate that healthy workspace? So with that in mind, in terms of the building, history tells us that buildings play a central role in the spread of disease. But as much as buildings can spread disease, if operated smartly, they can also help us fight against it. What framework should companies deploy to keep people safe when returning to work? We have covered a few of those thoughts for sure, I think, in terms of equal spacing, making sure that no one's sitting too close, kind of timing those out. But are there other kinds of thoughts out there in terms of asking employees ahead of time if they're feeling okay, kind of making sure that there's more opportunities to have remote meetings as well, is some of my thoughts in terms of, usually in a boardroom was the only way to do it. But I think there's more flexibility in terms of commuting to begin with, understanding whether or not you're healthy enough to come in that day.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like the research shows us, and this is all part of that viral response module, there's a whole section on kind of communication and how to do that, and you need to have a continuity plan in place. Some folks had those in place prior to COVID. Most people did not. And so really understanding what needs to be in the continuity plan, like how do you engage your employees or your tenants or your building occupants and actually make them part of the process of creating that plan. Because again, just to talk about trust again, you're actually going to have a greater impact if people have been part of creating the plan. They're more likely to follow the plan, and it's going to continue to increase that level of trust between you and the people that you're communicating with if they are actively part of creating these continuity plans. The continuity plans need to really be specific, and they need to be enacted in a way that is really looking at specific details and continual communication. You can't really over communicate in this current state. So people need to know that somebody has a plan and somebody is acting on that plan. So very important wherever you are, kind of if you're the facility manager, if you're the employer, if you're the building owner, really important that you understand kind of what you will do in these different scenarios, that the scenarios are planned for, and that all of your team know how to react in that particular scenario. So the continuity plan is something that it's a requirement in our certification because we just know how effective it is. So planning is important, the communicating of that is important, surveying your staff to understand what they're looking for, understanding that everybody's needs are going to be different as well is very important. So, really depending on what people's personal situation is, what their kind of job type is, where they are also in their career makes a big difference as to what they need as far as support is concerned. A stat that I like to throw out there, and I know real estate folks love this stat because it means people might return to the physical office, is that it is actually more stressful to work at home than it is to work in an office environment, statistically. So 40% of people who work at home pre-COVID were reporting high levels of stress, and only 25% in the workplace. So understanding that actually the home environment is an inherently more stressful environment to work in. So really encouraging people to come back to the office because it's actually better for their health as well as your productivity.
Yes, absolutely agree. And I'm currently watching a dog right now, and I know that the dog doesn't really doesn't really understand if I'm on a meeting or not. It just knows whether or not she wants to play right now. And I definitely understand. And that's a really good point in terms of getting people back into the office. You want to show them that this is a better environment than the productivity they can find at home. Whether that's small children, pets, or just cramped working spaces. We're talking about Manhattan. There's a lot of workers that just rent a bedroom because they expected to be in that office for the last year. So there's a lot of ways there's a lot of opportunity here to open that conversation to ask everyone, what factors should we consider in our building to get you back into the office and feeling productive and stress-free, or at least as stress-free as work can be. And that kind of leads into in the past with the green building movement, which has been growing over the past decades. It's gradually expanded from a focus on reducing water and energy usage to a holistic approach that incorporates how buildings affect the people in them. So with that in mind, is wellness the new sustainability? Is that kind of what's on everyone's mind at the moment?
I would say that we've just done a global survey of investors who invest in real estate, and actually they represent 5.75 trillion of assets under management. So kind of pretty influential group of folks that we spoke to and got data from. And they are really looking at health and wellness as an integrated part of their investment strategy when it comes to environmental, social, and governance investment strategies. So ESG investing. So health and wellness is now up there with other aspects of, carbon reduction or governance issues. So health and wellness has really gone from something that was kind of on the fringe or nice to have, a market differentiator before COVID, to something that you now have to be reporting on. You have to be measuring how you are impacting the health and wellness of the occupants of your building or of your employees. Metrics came out as a key issue that investors are looking for going forward. 90% of them said that they're going to increase their investment in health and wellness. So anybody who's looking to raise capital would be very well advised to be prioritizing health and wellness. And then of that 90%, 70% said that metrics and health metrics would really be the first thing that they would be prioritizing. And second is actually healthy building certification. So we were happy to hear that. But really kind of having best practices that are based on science, that can be measurable, can be verified. And then what are those metrics? So I think that sustainability is still key, obviously, in the world of real estate. It's something that we understand quite well. And I think that health and wellness is something that is still evolving as understanding from the real estate perspective, not from the research perspective. But real estate is really beginning to understand that they can have a measurable impact on health. And that in turn has a measurable impact on tenant retention, employee satisfaction, employee retention and attraction. It has a measurable impact on productivity. It has a measurable impact on all kinds of leasing and rent premiums. MIT came out with a study at the end of 2020 that buildings that have health and wellness certifications were actually commanding up to a 7% increase in rent. So there's a direct correlation between having a building that is optimized for the health of the occupants directly correlates with the performance, the financial performance of that property, or the companies within that property. So I think that health and wellness has really kind of come of age because of COVID, and it's been an accelerant rather than starting from scratch, right? This was something that was already kind of well understood before, but just not widely demanded.
Absolutely. And I think, historically, property managers haven't really considered health and safety as a measurable budget item. So I love the idea of what you mentioned about considering the commercial business impact and not putting these to application and keeping them in theory. So thanks to that healthy building movement, is it more common for buildings to design and promote employee health, or is there a gap between that theory and application still going?
I would say that there's still a real kind of gap. So of the folks we surveyed, only just over 50% were actually including health and wellness in their ESG metrics. So the desire is at 90%. The practice is at just over 50%. So there's a big gap. This is a real area of opportunity, whether you're the building owner, a real estate professional, or whether you are a tenant within that space. I think what we see both from the Fitwel certification side, where we saw 70% of the new Fitwel certifications last year were coming from tenants, were coming from businesses that are within the space. Previously, in previous years, the majority of the projects were coming from building owners. So there's a real shift towards tenants. And that was reiterated in that investor survey, that they were saying tenants are driving this, in this change in the marketplace, which really means people, right? It's the actual people within the building who are demanding this, rather than it being something kind of being driven at the kind of larger level, company level. So I think there's a lot of room for opportunity. What's really, I think, encouraging is that the evidence base, the strategies that are shown to have a measurable impact on health are known, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We really already know how to, in theory, create a healthy place, whether it's your home or your office. Actually, the evidence base exists, the strategies exist. How you actually enact those strategies is really what we're talking about. What are the new technologies? What are the ways that we can really bring to the table to bring about these environments that are optimized for people?
To me, it's a timing issue in terms of, how are we measuring the focus or commitment on health and wellness. To me, it seems whether we're talking to a business or whether we're talking to a landlord or a property manager, return to work strategy, the approach is all about health and wellness, right? How do we make people feel confident and comfortable to come back and reoccupy? And so the investments that are being made, and some of them were made last year, right, in anticipation of we're going to return to work in June, and then it was 4th of July, and then it was September, and then it was the holidays, and then it was January, and it continues to sort of pace out. So we saw a lot of activity last year and a lot of investment, and we're seeing even more so this year. And we're in the middle of conversations planning for 2022, but it's all around these type of technologies, right, that make me as an employee or me as a tenant have a better appreciation that that landlord or that asset manager is making the appropriate investment, right, and things that will protect me, right? And that's a lot of the foundational elements that are delivered through the Proxyclick platform, and further heightened through integrations through companies like OpenPath, where we can dynamically turn on and turn off credentials according to a schedule that I'm allocated to work, or according to communications that come from the property or my employer, or according to my self-attestation, right? My wellness questionnaires that I submit or my peers submit, or reservations that I have. So it's to me, it's exciting because much as like what Joanna had said, we're starting to see that shift, right? And wellness is now becoming, it's a join with overall ESG strategies.
And David, with those, just as a follow-up, with those questions that you're getting from property managers as you're looking to help them out with their access control and their doors, are you feeling that more of the concerns they're having are more balanced between not just them, but the employees? It kind of sounds more like those questions are coming from possibly employees first saying, hey, well, these are my concerns if I'm coming back into the office. Is there something you can do perhaps with the technology in the building to help and facilitate that return?
Yeah, exactly. So we're seeing, what's refreshing is you're seeing multidisciplinary or multifunctional teams work together, right, as a task force to identify and represent the, various needs or concerns of the constituents. So, and that's at a tenant level, an employer level, but that's also at a portfolio level for real estate, where it's no longer just the asset manager that makes the decision or the property manager that makes the decision or the building engineer. it's collaborative, right? And you bring in not only just those 3 disciplines, but you bring in other disciplines, and even some tenants are brought into that mix, really to talk about, what is, it basically comes down to what is the desired customer journey and experience that we're looking for. And that could be, someone who works in a property every day or is assigned to a home office to work, or it could be, it could be delivery people, could be contractors, but all of those people need to be represented as part of the overall strategy. And that helps identify and prioritize, like, what can we do? And some of it is low tech investment, things like decals and signage, right? And so others it's a technology investment, right? That where maybe you're not going to get everything that you want day one, but you start building a foundation and it iterates over time and it enhances the experience over time.
Yep, the right ecosystem, I agree, can get those office workers back into the office and keep those tenants renewing and keep everything moving smoothly. So, between working from home being more stressful than in the office, obviously no one wants to go out of the pan and in the fire, so to speak, where you end up in another stressful environment where you feel you're too close to everyone. Maybe the sanitation and the access isn't quite agreed upon through policy. There's burnout on the rise right now, and it's officially been labeled an occupational phenomenon. On the upside, mental health is becoming a less taboo topic, and employers are recognizing the need for change in the workplace. So with that in mind, how can spatial design contribute to the cause?
Sure, absolutely. So, with Fitwell, we look at all aspects of health. So yes, we're looking at physical health, and a subset of physical health is looking at infectious disease. But we also equally look at mental health and social health as well. So when we're talking social health, we're kind of talking about that trust in community. Mental health is something that we already have a great deal of knowledge about, but you're right, it hasn't been something that's really been spoken about openly, especially in the real estate industry, right? It's so far removed from what we think of as our jobs. We're, I think, all real estate professionals on this call. So, we're thinking bricks and mortar. We're thinking, I don't know. That's where my head's been at for the last 20 years. And in the last 10, have we really been thinking about how does that environment actually impact all aspects of health? So the good news again is that we know how to create environments that are optimized for mental health specifically. And just some examples of where your built environment really has an impact on your mental health. Air quality actually doesn't just impact the transmission of infectious disease, it also impacts your mental health. So something really important to understand that this is going to last beyond COVID, right? This isn't just a COVID solution. Air quality impacts mental health. It's also an equity issue as well. Another thing that impacts mental health is having access to daylight and views of nature. So this is a huge one. Having access to daylight and actually having daylight kind of physically being in a kind of a sunny environment or a daylit environment, whether you're inside or outside, actually affects your sleep patterns, your circadian rhythm, and that impacts all aspects of your health. If you aren't able to sleep, that is affecting your physical health. It's increasing risk of diabetes, of heart attack, of stroke. It's increasing your stress levels. It's also decreasing your productivity and creativity. So just having access to daylight has a massive impact on our overall health and productivity. So that again could be because your desk is close enough to a window to get that daylight, but it's also by going outside. Obviously, that's a great way to get that daylight. And then access to nature. I can't emphasize enough how important that is for our mental health. Being able to see greenery, well-maintained greenery, very important there, that you need to be in well-maintained outdoor spaces or indoor spaces with plants. They all have an impact on our mental health, but the maintenance is key, because actually if the greenery is poorly maintained, that's going to have a negative impact on trust, about a 5 percentage point reduction in levels of trust, compared to a greenery that's well maintained that has a +10 impact on levels of trust and mental health outcomes. So you can't just have like a dead fir tree in the entrance of the building, right? That's going to decrease trust, and it's just don't do it, please. No dead fir trees. So maintenance is the other thing that's really important to understand, that having a well-maintained space is actually impacting people's mental health and levels of trust, is also impacting their level of agency, which is an interesting phenomenon. Agency is where you feel like you have control over your own outcomes. Very important to support people's level of agency, especially when trust has been diminished. And maintenance has a big impact on levels of agency. So that's trash, that's having those egress doors and corridors well maintained, no dust bunnies in the corner. Like that cleanliness is actually affecting people's mental health and their levels of agency. So there's so much that we can do in our existing built environment to really support mental health. And it's really a case of just understanding the evidence base. It's not reinventing the wheel, right? Nothing that I've said is a new strategy. There's nothing there that I'm like, oh, I've never thought about that before. But there is an evidence base that shows you which have the greatest impact on mental health. And communication as well. This reiterate communication that we talked about before, having that two-way communication, having it in a way that's structured and consistent is really important as well for mental health.
Yeah, and like you said, it can't really be a one-time thing. You can't just throw a plant in the corner and say we did it. It's something that you need to work on a regular basis. A lot more research is coming out, as you mentioned. A simple missing item of agency could drop engagement by 5%. And people don't really forget. I think everyone's going to remember COVID for a very long lifetime. It was a very unique time frame that we're living through. So thankfully, that conversation is more open, both from a business and mental health perspective, to say, hey, how can we make this an enjoyable workspace that you can come back to? So you gave some really good examples during that as well, in terms of ideas such as plants, spacing, giving employees agency to make changes at their desk. And that's all proven to foster the collaboration, innovation that people need so that they can work together. But especially in a shared workplace, what about some technology that can enable a safe environment specifically and offer peace of mind to both the employee and the employer?
Certainly over the past 15 months, 18 months, depending upon where you are, the way we work has changed dramatically, right? The office used to be where you go to get work done, and we've proven that we can get work done in other places, right? Maybe at a higher stress level because we're dealing with other parts of our life that are converged and merged with our work. But we've proven that we can get it done from anywhere. So the role of the office now has shifted, right? Now it's around collaboration. It's around building and maintaining a culture. And so it's a connectivity point for all of us. And addressing the concerns or needs of health and wellness become now paramount to getting people to come in. And so the technologies that we, or the use cases and technologies that we talk to our customers about, and again, it's enterprise, it's landlords or property managers, it's around, how do you continue to extend the concept of social distancing back into the work environment? So tools that enable you to dynamically add permissions. So maybe today I work in the office downtown. Tomorrow, I'm going to meet with my teammates at one of our suburban locations, right? That's more convenient for many of us to travel because maybe we're not ready to get onto mass transit. So we're going to drive in our personal vehicles. We're going to do a shared ride. And so my ability now to reserve space, right, for me and my team, for all of us to have permissions that turn on so we can now process through whether that building is secured at the entry points, through the elevators, and up to that workspace. It's getting an understanding, a communication of the fitness or the wellness of each of us, right? So that might be those proclamations or self-attestations that we take. And then I also care about the building communicating to me about what's going on. What is the overall occupancy? When is the right time for us to arrive so that we're not stuck in a queue waiting to get up the lift or the elevator? And I also want to see, getting back to what one of the points Joanna made previously around cleaning or sanitizing schedules, right? When was the last time the space was cleaned? That's something I didn't worry about pre-COVID, right? It was like, there's coffee, there's coffee cup on the table and there's a stain. I'm going to wipe that up for my meeting. Now I really expect to see, when was the last time the space was clean? Because I don't know who was here before that. And now I'm aware and I'm alert towards that, and it makes me uncomfortable if it's not information that I could easily, have access to. So those are just, some of the things that we see in the course of our conversations. And what's wonderful is there are cloud-based and open technologies and mobile applications, that Proxyclick has partnered with, that OpenPath has partnered with to deliver a lot of these services and to serve as another touch point for communication, right? So now I now have a mobile application that gives me a lot of information that is relevant to me today, much more so than it was 2 years ago.
You bring up a great point about keeping track of where everyone's going, making sure there's things clean. And nowadays, this technology can keep track of when rooms are booked for collaboration. A team can go in. So ahead of time, even a day before, several days before, we can start to see that we need to schedule cleaning between these meetings because there's going to be a lot of people in at noon and then a lot of people in at 3 in between then. That room should be clean so there's no mystery substances making everyone nervous. So yeah, those are excellent points. And I also love the idea of the different hubs, being able to make sure that everyone knows they're going to the suburban satellite office as opposed to the downtown location, and balancing out the company resources between those two locations. All of that being tracked on the back end. Very good points.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, kind of from the investor perspective or the building owner perspective, that what we heard when we did that survey was that this technology is in the hands of the companies and the employees who are the tenants of buildings. And it is essential that the building owners and investors in those properties are at the forefront of this technology. Otherwise, there's going to be an issue where their tenants know more about their buildings than they do, which is unacceptable, obviously. So there's this real kind of issue around, especially things like air quality, who's in the rooms ahead of you, all of this kind of stuff. You as a building owner or as an investor in properties need to ensure that you are the one driving that data and driving that technology conversation, so that, obviously that's not something you want a tenant coming to you and saying, oh, I've put my own sensors in and I'm finding X, Y, and Z. And what are you going to do about it, right? You want to be the one who is driving that conversation as a building owner and investor. So I know that these are conversations that are happening real time of really, how do we monitor our buildings? When do we share that data? How do we share that data? What do we do if there are issues with that data, right? What do I do if my indoor air quality actually isn't optimal? So I think the big thing that COVID has done for the real estate industry is it's changed health from a nice to have to a risk. That if you are not on top of this, if you are not really driving the conversation, you now are at risk of actually losing tenants, of being liable for things that you weren't previously really thinking were priorities for you. So changing health into the risk bucket means that it's now a priority for everybody, because it's a game changer, basically. The other thing I think that we heard from investors that was a game changer is that they used to be at the kind of 30,000 foot level where they were investing in a portfolio of buildings, and the portfolio of buildings had tenants, and then the tenants were individuals. And there was really no connection between, sovereign wealth fund and individual in one of the buildings. Now, the investors have really understood that we are directly connected with the individuals in the properties that we invest in. And that is also a game changer. And it's great, actually, because it means we'll actually be thinking about the people in the buildings rather than the buildings as the asset themselves. The people, that human capital, is really foremost in people's minds because of COVID, which, from our perspective, that's a fantastic kind of outcome for COVID, in that we will really start to think about people, prioritizing people's health.
Absolutely. And so we've touched on the technology, we've touched on the impact it can have on mental health, and we've talked a little bit about making sure that there's a formal game plan. And when you put in a formal game plan, you have to understand, is this working or not? So if I'm a property manager, I've formulated a plan, I've reached out to my employees, I've got the technology in place. How can you measure the success of implementing a healthy building? Should this be based on the people metrics, the life of the workspaces in terms of years, how long that lasts, in general? So, health performance indicators for this kind of topic. What would be the way to measure the success? Because this is now more of a formal thing than it was before. And the idea really needs to shape to say, did I do this right? Or is there still a lot of room to improve? And where can I do that?
Sure. Metrics are what we do, right? We're a data-driven organization. So I would say some of the metrics that we look at are not health metrics themselves. We are looking at proxy metrics. So what is the outcome of having a healthier population within the building? So we're not looking at health metrics because obviously we are real estate folks, right? We're not in the business of health. We don't really want to go there. So some of the metrics that we look at are tenant or employee satisfaction. which a lot of folks already have those surveys. But when you start to correlate your tenant or employee satisfaction surveys and correlate those with the attributes that you have in different properties, you're going to see a correlation between, oh, look, these are all of the attributes I have in this particular location, and these are the tenant satisfaction or employee satisfaction numbers. And I'm seeing that there's a direct correlation between these two things. And we know that the satisfaction of employees is the number one thing driving their willingness to stay employed at that company. So really important metric. Stability is also a really important metric. So longevity of employees, longevity of tenants. So tenant stability is something obviously at the forefront of every mind of every real estate owner. So we think whether it's residential or commercial, that tenant stability is going to be a key metric going forward, because again, if your tenant base or if your employees are more satisfied, they're more likely to stay longer, and that stability in and of itself is better for the financial performance of the property. So these are the kind of things that folks are underwriting based on. And then rent premiums. I mean, right, let's just get down to dollars and cents. Can your property command a higher rent premium? Or actually, we're really now looking at the fact that you're probably going to lose rent rather than it be a premium, that you're actually going to have to discount your rent if you don't have health and wellness.
And then, David, are you seeing these when you're looking to implement the technology side of things? Are these health performance indicators directly or indirectly involved in these measures of success during your conversations with these property managers now? Can you at least kind of sense that they're kind of shifting a way to say, like, we need to know that they are happy enough, we need X number of employees back on this date and things like that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So the tenant or employee satisfaction, top of the list, right? That should translate into lease renewals and occupancy of properties, whether it's residential or whether it's commercial office. Certainly measuring rent premiums versus a competitive landscape is effective in assessing the effectiveness of these investments, of the overall strategy. And then we would look at it also as, and you touched on this, Ryan, not occupancy from a lease perspective, but actual individual occupancy, right? And unique occupants, right? How are we doing in attracting everyone back? And it might not be that I'm back on a 5-day-a-week schedule. I might not even be on a 3-day-a-week schedule, but the fact that I'm appearing in that office location becomes important. And that's a representation of, my comfort and confidence, and the fact that I'm still engaged, I think, overall. So I think all of those things sort of come together and begin to paint a picture of how are we doing, or how did we do with making this first phase of investment and rolling out the first phase of innovation. And that, I say phase because it's going to continue to evolve, right? It's not that you're done. You're never done. What you're hoping that you've done is you've built a future-proof strategy and foundation that you can continue to add and enhance. And sometimes the enhancement is removing things, but a lot of times it's just adding to a net new experience because of the feedback that you're getting through those satisfaction surveys or through those multidimensional, multifunctional teams that are providing input.
That's a really good point, especially about the unique employees arriving. I think that's perfect. And when you balance that mental health to say, or as you balance your policies at work to say, you can work 3 days a week remote. We'd like you to come in on these particular days. Here's how we're making that safe for you to do so. When you see these unique employees, regardless of whether it's 1 day a week or 5, that means you're doing it right. That means it's to the point where they say, I can come in and get work done here and feel safe and feel taken care of. And that's becoming, and I think moving forward, we're already seeing this, of course, from this conversation, is that's going to be more important in any kind of property right now. Back before, you used to be able to increase your lease based on things like a coffee shop in the lobby, parking capacity, fitness room on site, swimming pool. I think we're going to start seeing more of a flyer or more information on things, trying to think of the word, what has been done to keep things clean. So a healthy building will go from kind of a nice to have to a competitive must have. And so what are your predictions on how this will evolve long term?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of mentioned a few things that we're seeing long term. So fit well, I mentioned this to you guys earlier that we had a 644% growth in Fitwel certifications in Q4 of 2020. So as far as kind of people's use of best practices and wanting like that third party certification, that not only are we doing these things, but somebody else is telling us that we have done them to the prescribed standard. So it isn't good enough just to say that you've done it. Now you actually need someone else to say you've done it and you've met the standard, and this is evidence-based. So I think that we're seeing is a huge change in the kind of health and wellness space. So that kind of need for the data and the verified data as well is a big difference that we're seeing on the property level. And that's because it's being demanded by tenants and it's being demanded by investors. And so if you are in the middle as a property owner, you are going to do this, right? Because you need to be able to respond to both of those key stakeholders for you. If you are the company, an employer, then you need that data in order to share that with your employees and say, we as a company care about you. We have located in this property or in these properties specifically because they have these attributes. And we are looking and we are measuring and we are ensuring that we are creating the best possible environment for our employees. So all of these things are now critical. As you said, they are now a priority where they didn't used to be a priority, right? It did used to be about the, do I have a gym? Is it a cool space? Is it near, I don't know, well, a park, actually, that's still really important. Oh, yeah. But there were a lot of amenities. There was a kind of an amenities war that was going on. And I think that has now shifted into a slightly different kind of look at what are the priorities. And health and wellness is obviously now a priority. So yeah, we're seeing that. And we're seeing also that same investor survey showed that investors going forward, so their projections for the next 3 years, 90% of them said that they were going to increase their investment in health and wellness going forward, and that they expected, 92% expected demand to continue to increase through the next 24 months. So everybody's expecting that this is going to continue, that this isn't just going to end the day that, you know, mask wearing is no longer needed now. So that's it. We're done with COVID. I think we just talked about this. We all know about the Spanish flu, and that was 100 years ago. This is a kind of a once in a lifetime, hopefully. This is a generational shift that we've seen. We're saying that we've seen a shift in the market that would normally take about 10 years, has just taken a year. So this kind of change in demand, this change in understanding from all the way from individuals up to the investors, that kind of big shift in understanding usually takes a long time. So this has really been an accelerator in that way. We don't see health and wellness kind of dropping down off the priority list for the foreseeable future.
It's moving up right now. Yeah. And then in the future. A lot of considerations on all sides. And David, in terms of, do you predict that being more on top of the list of demands for different workflows in buildings with OpenPath?
Yeah, I do. And Joanna said it, basically we went from an expectation of things evolve over a 10-year cycle to things change very rapidly, and it's a 1 year. And if I just simplify that further from a property technology standpoint, right? Prop tech, just as a category, and health and wellness is, to me, is a subset of that. Only the most innovative portfolios were making investments in prop tech, right? As recently as 2019, there was investment, but it was very deliberate, right? And there was a lot of, hey, I'm going to let these leading organizations, they're going to trailblaze, and then we're going to learn off of them, and then we'll make an investment a little later on. COVID absolutely changed that game. It went from being a nice to have to a must have, right? So people that weren't, and this is businesses and this is portfolios, that weren't thinking about that customer journey, that weren't thinking about, you know, the impact of cloud-based technologies or modernization of cloud-based technologies, and the importance of open frameworks, right? So systems can talk together and play nicely rather than having silos. And thinking about the impact of mobile, right? These are all things that were, you know, sort of not on the edge, but they were pretty close to being on the edge. Now everybody is talking about that. Everyone has had this wake-up call because they know it's a foundational element to getting people to come back, right? And you have to make people feel comfortable and confident to do that. So it's been remarkable, and I don't see it changing. I think if anything else or nothing else, it has put a spotlight on the limitations of legacy tech. And there's a lot of legacy tech in real estate, right? So there's a There's a huge body of work that has to occur over the next handful of years, and it will take time to do that. There's a natural capital improvement cycle, but it's inevitable that that is occurring right now. So it's an exciting time to be in this space.
Absolutely. So with that, we're coming to the end here. So a few things definitely to keep in mind if you're looking into how to get employees back into the office. It sounds like formulating a game plan surrounded around mental health, employee safety. That used to be things like making sure that no one gets into the office, but now we're looking more at the microbial level. Using the right technology to make sure that the collaborative spaces are cleaned, and using verifiable data is going to be the way forward from now and several years in the future as we recover from this remote working environment that we all had during COVID. So at this time, we're going to wrap this up. David McGinnis with OpenPath, Joanna Frank with the Center for Active Design. I want to thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the future of the healthy building at Proxyclick Connect. Again, I'm Ryan Koch, Customer Success Lead with the Americas. Any closing thoughts by either of you?
I would just kind of end on an optimistic note. I mean, I feel like as a building professional, I'm excited that we can be part of this solution, and that there's a lot that's known, that we already know how to create environments for people to thrive. So not just for them to be safe, but to really thrive. And I do see that this next maybe decade is really going to put the emphasis on people and creating environments that really are optimized for people. So I'm excited that we are part of that solution, right? As non-health professionals, we still really have a big role and a measurable role to play in people's health outcomes. I would say this is my mantra right now, and that is that we do not need to reinvent the wheel, that the solutions that we need to be putting in place now, many of them are already exist. And the evidence base, the research behind how to actually create environments that are optimal, not just for addressing infectious disease, but also creating environments where people can thrive for their mental health, as well as their physical health. This research already exists. There's 100 years of public health research. It's just that we on the building side aren't familiar with it. It's much more an issue of translation than it is of needing to go out and try to figure this out from scratch. Right? That is absolutely not necessary. So that's my kind of like, please, this this already exists, guys. Like we already know how to create environments where people thrive. Just because you don't know how to do it doesn't mean that it isn't known. Because I hear so many people saying like, oh, if only we knew how to create somewhere that, was X. And it's like, we do, it's just you don't. But the world knows, right? That actually public health knows. It's just that they haven't done a great job of interacting with the building professionals up until now.
Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed today's conversation. I'll try and keep my closing comments brief here. So first and foremost, healthy buildings, green initiatives, return to work strategies, they all require buildings to adapt and continue to evolve to meet the expectations of occupiers and stakeholders. The building technology that you have in place today and the solution architectures that you're defining have a direct impact on your options for tomorrow and your ability to meet ongoing challenges and ongoing needs to evolve. So there are really three key attributes that I think improve your probability for success over time as you're thinking about building technologies. The first is native cloud-based software instead of on-premise software. The second would be open APIs and open integrations instead of closed proprietary connections, including maybe even relay-based hardware connections. And then the third would be focus on frictionless, responsive mobile experiences. Those are what will drive higher adoption rates and overall higher utilization and higher usage. So with that, I thank you again for your time and your interest. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I know I will.
Fantastic. Again, I want to thank you both so much, and everyone who watched this. If you have questions, it sounds like there's answers out there. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope some of those questions got answered. Otherwise, feel free to follow up.